Today on Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat, we join the fiberglass gurus at Wildfire Marine as they prepare the Bertram 25 project for a new flotation bracket and outboard power.
It's a real good candidate for that because there's a ton of space in this boat once you get those engines out.
FS Boating editor George LaBonte joins Jonathan Bilby aboard his beautifully restored 1978 Boston Whaler Outrage.
His goal of passing this boat down someday to his daughters was easily going to be attainable, and at the very least they would enjoy many days on the water together as a family.
The experts at TRB dive into the skimmer skiff project, starting with bilge basics.
Whether you put in a bilge pump or just running some wire, these guys take a tremendous amount of pride in doing an amazing job on the boat. I can't wait to see how this boat progresses.
And the Rocky Point Boatworks team provides valuable insight while performing routine service work on a new Suzuki outboard.
We're going to be servicing the Suzuki, and for that I brought in my good friend Mark Dixon, and we're going to go over some things on the service.
All coming up on Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Join us as we follow one-off builds to all-out restorations in Stuart, Florida's Dreamboat District, home to some of the best custom boat builders in the world. From modest to over-the-top, industry experts from the district's premier facilities show how it's done. Fiberglass repair, custom paintwork, engine rigging, electronics installations, and more. And boating editor George LaBonte shares the stories of boaters who have already turned their dreams into reality. This is Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat.
Here at Wildfire, we're working on David Taylor's 25 Bertram. We're converting from an inboard outboard to a bracketed boat. It's a real good candidate for that because there's a ton of space in this boat once you get those engines out. First thing we did to the boat was we filled in the outdrive openings. We cut 2 layers of 3/4 inch marine plywood for both hulls. Once we glassed those in place, then we had to go and reinforce the transom because it's in its regular configuration as an IO, it's not strong enough to hold the bracket. The third piece of plywood that we put in on the inside, of 3/4 marine ply, over the 2 that were originally in the boat, we had to go ahead and scribe it to the shape of the boat because, as I said, it's a rounded transom. We had to bevel the edges and it hits at different points. We went ahead and filled all the gaps with a thickened resin cabosil, and we did that also on the wood, so we had a good bond all the way through. Otherwise, there would just be some hard contact points, and it wouldn't get a total contact on the whole transom. So that's the reason why we use that thickened resin, so that we can go ahead and get a good smooth transition. Because of the way it doesn't fit really smooth, a square piece of plywood with the rounded transom, we went ahead after that had set up, went and filled all the gaps again with thickened cabosil, so we would have a nice smooth transition on the glass. The smoother your surface is, the stronger the glass is going to be. So then we went ahead and we put glass around the perimeter of that. Once we had that piece of 3/4 inch marine ply laminated in and faired, we went ahead and put a laminate of 1708 biaxial fiberglass over the entire piece. The reason we use 1708 is because it's a very strong structural piece of fiberglass where the strands, rather than being like a woven roving, which is a 0 and 90, the biaxial glass is actually on a 45s. Basically, no matter where your joints are, we still had double glass going over the joint. So it's a much stronger fiberglass. Once that piece is set up, then we went ahead and put our strong back on across the transom. And basically it looks like a shelf, but what it is, it's a piece of material that we go ahead and it's double layer of 3/4 inch marine ply that we go as thick as we can fit behind the transom wall. And we take that to the corners of the transom. The corners of the transom are probably the strongest part of the boat outside of the keel because you have an overlapping glass coming from the hull sides, the transom, and up from the bottom. When we put this fiberglass on the shelf, we make the glass long enough so that the bolts for the bracket actually go through that glass. And so we're basically pulling on the corners of the transom. We've spread the load out across the entire boat instead of just pulling on the center. That one knee that we did add to the center is to take up the thrust part of the bracket. When the 2 motors are pushing on it, the bottom of the bracket wants to push its way into the boat. And to stop that, we put that knee there. And so we set the knee so that it's physically notched into that keel. So we're not just relying on a fiberglass bond, it's actually pushing against it. And as long as it's pushing against it, it'll never let go. Now that our transom's wrapped up, we're pretty pretty confident it's going to hold this bracket without any problem. We've never had an issue with them before. So we're going to go ahead and work on some seating and some other aspects on the boat while we're waiting for the bracket to arrive. So we've got a lot of work to do there.
When we come back, George LaBonte joins Dreamboat owner Jonathan Bilby aboard his fully restored 1978 Boston Whaler Outrage in this week's One Man's Dreamboat segment. This segment brought to you by Armstrong. Experience the Armstrong Advantage.
Do you have the Armstrong Advantage? In its most basic form, an Armstrong outboard bracket improves the efficiency of your outboard motor. This equates to a faster time to plane and higher top speeds. The list of advantages continue with improved maneuverability, added space, and a quieter ride. Adding a swim platform accompanied by an Armstrong boarding ladder will certainly add to your day out on the water. Isn't it time for you to gain the Armstrong Advantage?
Welcome back to Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Join us for this week's One Man's Dreamboat segment with Florida Sportsman Boating editor George LaBonte as we feature anglers who have already launched their dream. Florida Sportsman began these features 30 years ago, and the dreams just keep getting better.
A lot of the manufacturers that we feature on these One Man's Dreamboat segments have got a huge following, in fact a cult following if you will. Of all of these manufacturers, one of the biggest followings we've seen is with the Boston Whaler boats. Today we're in Titusville to meet up with Jonathan Bilby and his family to check out his beautifully restored 1979 V22 Outrage.
My experience in boating started like most people in Florida. You grow up, you go out with friends on small skiffs, small john boats. After high school, I joined the Coast Guard, and from there you establish a new respect for boating and what a good boat can bring you and what a bad boat can do to you. The 22 Boston Whaler is still in production by the commercial division of Boston Whaler today. So when I decided on the boat that I would like for my family and for me, what we looked at was stability, safety, and reliability. And what better than a boat that they still use today?
Not only did Jonathan's Coast Guard experience give him some insight into the Whaler brand, his father-in-law, who is our camera boat driver today, had a heavy hand in his decision-making process when it came time to buy a boat to restore. Jonathan's father-in-law purchased brand new in the 1980s a 17-foot Whaler Montauk, which he still owns today. Jonathan's 2-year search for the right boat ended in the Florida Panhandle when he finally found the Whaler he was looking for.
Then we got home and the project starts. The older classic Boston Whalers with a sealed fuel cell, they have to be pulled, they have to be drained and inspected. Upon inspection, we realized immediately that it was going to have to be replaced. So working off the old design, we built a new fuel tank. Once you go down to the bare hull, you can start new. And when you start new, the cap is off, the fuel tank is exposed, and you have access to all of the wire runs. And there's nothing in your way to stop you from running brand new lines instead of trying to make something old hobbled back together work again. Once we tackled the electrical, we went into cosmetics. It's not advised to sand bottom paint, it's toxic. So we outsourced this to a dustless blasting company. They came on site. The hull was completely faired, top to bottom. It was wet sanded, then it was guide coated, and then wet sanded again, and then they sprayed gel coat top to bottom. The reason we chose the Boston Whaler, this particular model, was for everything that it was when it was built, and we wanted to keep that and maintain that for that legacy. We had to find where we could pick up the rub rail in the same desert tan and find the red insert, and it was literally one call to a Boston Whaler rep and they can drop ship from the factory. They still had exactly what we needed for this boat. We were able to source locally 14-foot long pieces of teak. We maintained the original design, the original look, and we created our own gunnels for this boat. And we patterned them off the original that came with the boat. The engine on this boat was a 2005 Yamaha 225, and that stuck out as one of the saving points that made this a great candidate for a restoration.
The F225 four-stroke Yamaha that came with the boat when Jonathan bought it was another example of durability and reliability. After a thorough going over of the mechanics on the old Yamaha, this boat ran like a top and was going to be a perfect complement to the 22-foot Whaler.
Designing the boat for comfort and with my wife and children in mind, you want it to be an enjoyable experience. You want it to be something that they look forward to, not something that's, the joke we say is forced family fun. You want them to want to go on the boat because one day it will be theirs. I just look forward to them having fun and inviting their friends and just, you know, asking for the day, hey, can we take the boat out?
After a day on the water with Jonathan and his family, his goal of passing this boat down someday to his daughters was easily going to be attainable. And at the very least, they would enjoy many days on the water together as a family. As we wrapped up our day, it was evident to us that Jonathan really took pride in the appearance of his boat, so we decided to hook him up with a cleaning kit from our friends at Surehold to make sure he had all the tools he needed to keep this boat standing tall.
After an initial investment of $3,500 and spending $33,292 on repairs and custom modifications, the cost of Jonathan's Dreamboat comes to a total of $36,792. When we return, the experts at TRB begin rigging on the TRB Customs skimmer skiff.
This segment brought to you by Yamaha. Reliability starts here.
Your time on the water is precious. You return season after season to make unforgettable memories, fight a few fish, reconnect with friends, and recenter yourself. If you count on having this time, you need an outboard you can count on to power it. That's why boaters stay with Yamaha for the long run, for life. They know reliability starts here.
Welcome back to Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Join us as the experts at Two Rivers Boatworks begin with building the perfect bilge on the TRB Customs skimmer skiff.
So here at Two Rivers Boatworks, we're really excited to go pick up the skiff. It's over with Dave at Rocky Point Boatworks. He's taking care of all of the acrylic panels and all the acrylic stuff on it that we needed done. Being that this is a sold boat, we got it back to the shop as soon as we could. We've got a lot of work to do to it. We've got a lot of plumbing, pumps, everything to install. So I turned the boat over to Royce, and he's gonna get going on it so that we can get this boat over to the customer.
So the first thing we're gonna do is tackle the plumbing in the boat. We're doing that first because there's still a lot of space in the boat, and that stuff usually does take a lot of space. And you gotta lay that stuff out first as well, because that kind of sets the guidelines of where your pumps are gonna be and whatnot. So the first thing we're doing is we're measuring where we're gonna put the high-speed pickup in the boat for the live well. You wanna make sure that you have a flat surface to mount it, you have the room for the pump, the valve, and everything else. You don't wanna mount it in front of the motor. You'll mess up the flow of the water to the outboard. You also want to make sure that you're not drilling down into a bunk or a strake. So what you want to do is you want to do your measurements, drill with an 1/8 inch pilot hole just to be safe. Make sure where it comes down is good to go. I noticed I had to move a trailer bunk to the side, so I loosened it up, moved it to the side so I could put the high-speed pickup in there. So once we knew all the obstructions were out of the way and we were ready to go, we wanted to make sure that we had the right size hole saw, because you don't want to over drill and have too big of a hole in there. You want it to be a nice snug fit.
So the best way to find the right hole saw for what you're looking to do is either A, read the instructions. Hopefully they have that in there. If they don't, usually what you can do is on something like this, like a through hole, you take the nut and you can just go through your assorted hole saws and find the one that just is bigger than the threads. The snugger the fit, the better, as long as it goes through.
So now that we've found the right size hole saw, it's time to drill the hole. Pretty straightforward. You want to make sure you just drill a straight hole. You don't want it to be off center. When the bit comes down, you want it to bite perfectly all the way around. So once the hole is cut, we want to do a dry fit. Give it a quick measurement, make sure everything's right, and that's pretty much all a dry fit is. It takes 2 seconds and it's worth doing. There's also 4 mounting holes on the bottom, and once we've got it straight, we can use that time to mark those holes so that I can drill those holes later once I pull the fitting back off, and I'll know that when I go to mount it the next time that it's perfectly straight. So once all the holes are drilled, you want to clean up the mess real quick. And what you really want to do is you want to wipe everything down with acetone real well, the surface that you're bonding to, the pickup itself, because the bond is only as good as the surfaces are clean. So you want a really clean surface for your bond. So the next thing is you want to pick whatever kind of sealer you're going to use. So in a through-hull, high-speed pickup, anything you got below the waterline, you want to make sure it's rated for below the waterline use. So when you're putting your sealer on, don't be afraid to put it on heavy. You want a good squeeze out when you mount the through-hull up there. Yes, it's going to make a mess. Oh well, it's sealed. You're not going to have to worry about a bunch of leaks later on. So on this fitting, there's 4 holes. You could use screws. I chose to use 4 through bolts instead, just for extra added security. If you can, I highly suggest it. So once you've got the through hole mounted up there, you're gonna have sealer gooping out of every hole. That's what you want. Everyone has their different way of doing it. I like to use a dry rag first, wipe around and get 90% of it off with the dry rag. I feel like the dry rag holds it better. And then what I like to do is I like to come back with a rag soaked in acetone and do the final wipe around for a nice clean finish around the fitting.
When we return, the team at Rocky Point Boatworks gets educational while performing routine service work on a new Suzuki outboard.
This segment brought to you by Fiberglass Coatings, the largest selection of fiberglass materials in the United States.
FGCI is a leading supplier of composite materials, family-owned for over 60 years and headquartered right here in Florida. We have the materials and technical expertise to service manufacturers, repair professionals, and DIYers alike. Our gel coat color matching is a favorite of seasoned professionals and weekend warriors. Access our online store at fgci.com, call to speak with a product specialist, or visit our stores in Fort Lauderdale or St. Petersburg. FGCI is your partner on boat projects big and small.
Welcome back to Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. Hey, join us as the team at Rocky Point Boatworks perform a routine water pump replacement and more on a new Suzuki outboard.
All right, today at Rocky Point Boatworks, we're going to be doing a 100-hour service on a Suzuki. And for that, I'm going to bring in my good buddy Mark Dixon with Dixon Speed Marine to help us out and get this service knocked out. So the first thing we're going to do is start with the lower unit service, so let's get going. Before we begin our service, we noticed that we got string hanging out, so this is one of the main reasons you do pull off your prop. Also, it takes a little weight off the lower unit and helps you back out later on. So we'll go ahead and get this off. The prop saver there, the little thing did its job. It didn't allow it to go into the seal, so that's a good thing. So we'll take this braid out. Wasn't much, but it don't take much to mess the seal up. So a couple key things you want to look out for when you're dropping your lower unit. There may be some hidden bolts under an anode, so make sure you get those. You don't want to damage your lower unit removing it by leaving those bolts in. Just make sure any hoses or anything like that aren't in the way or attached, and you may break something by not removing them prior to pulling it all the way down.
Okay, so now we're going to remove our water pump, inspect our components. Here we're looking for any type of burning marks, scoring, pitting, and then impellers. As you can see here, this one has a little bit of memory into it. You see how it's got the little grooves, possibly you may see, how it's got little lines in here. We want to replace these every year as needed. On this plate, we're looking for grooves. As you can see, we have a few small ones here. It's not going to hurt performance, but we're going to replace it because it's part of our kit that we get from Suzuki. We're also going to look for any type of abnormal corrosion down here or on the edges. If the walls get too thin, it will pull air instead of water, so we always look to make sure there's no heavy corrosion on our walls that the plate goes to. I'll just tell you, I popped this cup out off camera. They usually are very difficult. This one was very easy. I tend to put grease inside the cup also. It's not safe you have to. I use the whole O-ring in, and I like to have it on this cup to make it easier to come in and out later on. Just the way I do it, you can do it any way you like. This is my method. I've been doing this since 1990, so take from it what you may. Done. O-ring all in. Now I'm gonna grease the whole outer edge. Now that we have our cup back in our housing, we're gonna put our wear plate down the bottom, install our keyway, and then we're gonna lube everything. Put grease on the bottom plate, because our impeller's gonna ride on this bottom plate when we clamp it down. I'll just put grease on the shaft so that we don't get stuck. Impeller is stuck on the shaft. Now before I put this down, you'll notice the keyway is lined up to usually one vane. I grab that vane in my hand, I point the keyway a direction so I know where I'm coming down, so I can make sure I have the alignment proper. Now I push it on, then I try to twist the impeller because sometimes I've had the keyway kick out. So always try to manually turn your impeller before you put it back together. Okay, I put grease inside my cup. We're gonna put it on, water tube goes to the back, as we've seen. See how we have our little notch out here, our little notch out here. Put it down. Now I put a little pressure on top and I twist in a clockwise position. And if you're really good, you put 4 bolts back in it. You must make sure you lube your drive shaft splines. And right here, we also have a wear bushing that we lube this also. Now I'm also gonna lube the bushing in the midsection when we tilt it back up. I like to have plenty of grease. There again, just remember, I'm the grease king when it comes to grease. Now before you put the gear case on, it's always best to have a bolt lubricated and ready to go. If you're like me, you might want to have 2 bolts ready to go because it seems like I always like to drop one. I'll have Muscle Man put it up for us.
You got it?
Yep, push it. Yep. When you're putting these bolts in, you really want a strong guy to put them in. That's why we got Dave here. Not only does he smell strong, but he is strong.
So now that we got the lower unit back up, we're gonna double check and make sure all our bolts are tight and in place, and we're gonna move on from here.
What's coming up next week, Dave?
We're gonna install spark plugs and change the gear oil.
So stay tuned.
Next week on Florida Sportsman Project Dreamboat. The team at Rocky Point Boatworks moves forward on the Suzuki outboard service with proper spark plug inspection and more. The fiberglass experts at Wildfire Marine design and build a custom interior for the Bertram project. George LaBonte joins Jessica Wakefield aboard her custom 26-foot Goldline. And the experts at TRB put their creative minds to the ultimate test on their latest TRB Edition project.